Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week.
I said to the therapist, when Chloe was around, I wasn't there for her. And when she died, I wasn't there for her. So now my brain tells me I've got to be there for everybody else. I've just done the Great North Run and I carry a lock of her hair in my pocket. And when it gets tough, you just give it a little bit of a squeeze. I just talk about her all the time. I talk about what we do because fingers crossed it saves a young life.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community.
We are the home of the UK's conversation about mental health. Thanks for your streams, your downloads, and thanks for checking us out this week. Apologies first and foremost for the slightly croaky voice. I've got that third week in September vocal, which comes from having two young kids who are at primary school, so they've been out and about for the summer. They get back into the classroom, the germs start to swill around, and Muggin's ear takes the, full in the face. So if I sound a little bit hoarse, you do not have to send me honey and lemons. I am well stocked with soothers, hot blackcurrant, coffee, and various other things as well. So I'm doing okay, but that explains the voice. Hey, our guest this week on the programme is Trevor Bygate. Now, Trevor does some wonderful work with the organisation Papyrus, who help and support families who are bereaved by suicide, but also provide through Hopeline UK a helpline to help and support young people who are struggling with their mental health. He's also worked with organisations like Cruise Bereavement UK, an organisation you might know, and the Royal British Legion, because he served in the armed forces. Now, we're talking to Trevor about his story and his journey because he lost his daughter, Chloe, to suicide back in 2014, 10 years ago. And in that 10-year period, Trevor, of course, has been through a lot. He's now focusing his life towards helping and supporting other people, using his lived experience to help and support other families and try and change the conversation about young suicide. He really is doing some fantastic work, and he's doing talks, presentations, a million and one different organizations that he's working with and working for. So it was great to spend a little bit of time with him and to find some time to spend some time with him as well. We're going to have this conversation, and you can find links to some of those organizations in the podcast notes. But we started off by talking about the fact that when Chloe died, Trevor was actually serving in the armed forces, and the geography of that situation made things particularly difficult, including when she was with us and she was struggling with aspects of her mental health. So Trevor picks up the story.
Yeah, so, I was in Germany from 2009 to 2011. And Chloe lived in Haverfordwest with her mum, but she had a few issues with her mental health, and she didn't get to finish her exams. And then she did. Eventually, I wrote a letter, and she went back, and she passed so many, but she needed another one to go to uni. So I invited her to come to Germany with me. She came over to Germany. I got her into the sixth form at JHQ in Mönchengladbach, and she studied there. Got that extra one. And then, she decided she wanted to go back to Haverfordwest to be near her friends and study with them and so on and so forth. So yeah, it was a good to have her there, have her around. She enjoyed it. I let her go traveling to Brussels and stuff like that. And, she found a night scene. It was hard to let us get back on a flight back home to the UK.
What was it like in terms of, obviously the military aspect of it and living apart, but also being aware that maybe she had some issues that she were dealing with? You were obviously a little bit tied in terms of what you could do, because military life is a little bit dictatorial in terms of like where you have to be and where you need to be, maybe. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I always, ever since Chloe passed away, I always sort of thought with the thoughts of not being there enough for her, and the how much guilt did I think myself, and how much did I put onto the military for sending me away and moving me away, sort of thing. But, over the time I've got to understand that, I was in a specific role and I did move about. They moved to Southwest Wales, so it wasn't my choice, and I had to make the most of it as much as I could. So, we've seen them in the summer holidays and Christmases and so on and so forth. And, it was hard to be a parent. She was so far away, because I went from watching up to North Yorkshire for 3 years, then to Germany, then back to Russia, then to Afghan. 2 exercises in America and Arizona. And obviously the second exercise I was in America, that was when I found out when she passed away.
I mean, that must have been absolutely devastating for you, not least because obviously anyone's missing their family at any point, particularly when they're working away. I can't even imagine, Trevor, what it's like having to have that conversation and just hear those words and almost be powerless by geography in terms of what you can do to affect anything.
We were, it was April 26th, we just got the message that one of the links had crashed in Afghan, killing 5 soldiers. And, one of them was a good mate of mine, James. And then 4 days later, my wife told me that Chloe had been found. So it was a traumatic time because we were just planning on having a little parade in on the American Air Force Base where we were at. But for James and the other guys that passed away, and then obviously I found out about Chloe, and it was just a case of your world caves in. You were reaching out for what to do for support and help. And it was hard because being in the army and going through what I went through, it was a little bit, I tried to find the right support, and I think they struggled to find the right support and how to support me. They put me on a flight in Phoenix on my own, and I was sat in the middle of the family laughing and joking for 10 hours, and they picked me up from the airport and drove me to Haverfordwest where she was, and and it was hard because I had to go and see Chloe, and funeral, organise all that sort of stuff, and police and coroners, and I was off work for about 3 months afterwards, just recovering. And then eventually I wanted to get back to work and stuff like that. And then I started to get involved in charity because I thought, what could I do? What could I do to make a difference and make changes? So I jumped on my bike and cycled across the country for Child Bereavement UK. Then I cycled for 24 hours in Tesco's for the same charity. Then I did the Brighton Marathon. Well, I signed up to do the Brighton Marathon and the London Marathon. Didn't realise they were 2 weeks apart. So, I managed to get that done. And then I just went on it. I just went for it. So, and then I ended up doing the Barcelona Marathon, 3 London Marathons, 62-mile ultra marathon for SOBs, which is Survivors of Bereavement by Suicide. And it's just about giving back, if you know what I mean.
I'm not asking you for like a light bulb moment or anything like that, but is there a point in that what must be terrible, terrible grief where you think, okay, on to the next stage now? And then what does that look like? Is that weeks down the line? Is that months down the line where you start to think, right, I need to do something, or I want to do something? Is there an element of it which is like I need to distract myself by getting back into work or throwing myself into something else? What is that mindset like during that time in terms of just like the coping mechanisms, but also then finding the sort of the inspiration to think, I'm going to take on these, incredible physical challenges or whatever it would be?
I think for me, it was driven a little bit. I love the army. I enjoyed it. It was great. But unfortunately, it wasn't a place for somebody who was grieving the suicide of a child. And, after 5 years of just finding the system, having to go on my own journeys, and eventually I spent 2 weeks in a psychiatric ward, came out, and I never stepped foot in the army again. And I was medically discharged with complex PTSD. And so I didn't get the chance to make the changes in the armed forces. So I thought, what can I do outside? And that's when I was like, let's get on the fundraising awareness raise and, let's talk about it. Bandwagon, I got on and crusade. Obviously what Chloe did, it was traumatic, but it also inspired me to make change. Working with camps sometimes and look at the difficulties the young people have in camps with inpatient beds, with transitioning from young person to adult. And that's where Chloe fell in, you see. She was under camps as a child. And then when that transitioned to adult, there's a bit of a gap in the middle, and she just got stuck in that gap.
You mentioned there the diagnosis with PTSD. In terms of the conversations that you had around that, was that based on your experience with Chloe? Was that combined with things, obviously, with the armed forces? Might be traditionally, as somebody who's been in the armed forces and a diagnosis of PTSD, might not seem out of the normal. But of course, you'd also gone through this incredibly traumatic thing. In terms of the journey just to get to the bottom of that, was that a difficult time for you?
It was, because I understand that what happened to Chloe would have had a massive effect on me. And I was originally diagnosed with adjustment disorder and complex grief. But unfortunately, the way I was treated and the support that I felt I didn't get, it made matters worse. And I felt like I was fighting a battle at times in that last 5 years. Don't get me wrong, I did achieve still, and I still went to Chicksons and did a 5-week intelligence officers course, which was really intense. And I passed it, so I was proving that I could still do things. I went to the Army Welfare Service and did an 8 months Army Welfare Workers course. That was my dream, to do that course, finish it, then make change. I had to withdraw 2 weeks from the end, unfortunately, because of certain factors, and then I went back to Washington unit. And after a couple of weeks, I was in a hospital for 2 weeks and never set foot back. So I came back from the welfare course fully fit. 2 weeks later, I was out of the Army. Actually, I've had some good news recently. I did have a psychiatric review a couple of weeks ago. And the psychiatrist turned around and said, you show no signs and symptoms of complex PTSD. He said, it feels as though what you've been doing is self-healing. And the fact that what you are doing is inspirational. And to hear that from a psychiatrist was pretty special sort of thing. So, do you
think that's a combination then, Trevor, of getting yourself back out there in terms of sort of learning new skills with courses and things like that, using your personal experience to also help and support other people, and to sort of have that sense of purpose, that sense of mission, if you like? Do you think that that's a big part of it, that maybe means that you're not forever living in the past in terms of your Army experiences and your Army career? You can think about that as something you can build on. And I wonder whether or not, if that is the case, how do you balance that with what I imagine, is absolutely understandable grief of the memories of a daughter that's no longer, with you. That someone says, "You're fine now, Trevor, you're all right," but doesn't mean you haven't been through the traumatic things that you've been through.
Yeah, that's true. And, you wanted, the problem I had was that my grief was always delayed, because I fought with the Army for 5 years, which delayed my grief. Then I've been fighting for another 5 years since I've been out, which it makes your thoughts and feelings just go all over the place at times. But, I found the passion in helping other people and supporting other people. And, I'm all over the place now doing prevention of young suicide presentations. I did one to Kenton Medway, patient safety staff the other day. I travelled to Bath, Caution, did a presentation to 150 Army welfare officers on major charities. I've got 3 tomorrow in London, back to back, for a charity called Listening Place.
I'm surprised that we've actually managed to find this time to sit down. So I'm delighted I've got you with for a bit of time to have this conversation. Can I ask you, when you're doing those sessions, and obviously a lot of it is obviously either you sharing your story or you listening to other people's stories. On both counts, how much is Chloe at the forefront of your journey? I mean, is that sort of, is Chloe someone you talk about straight away, and then when people are telling you about their experiences, it must make things significantly easier to empathise, because you physically know maybe what somebody's going through if they've lost a young person to suicide?
Yes, I mean, the presentation always starts off with, you talk a little bit about your life experiences and you, so potentially you will connect a lot with the audience when they know who you are, what you're doing, or why you're doing it. That's the big thing, to try and connect and they feel the passion. And then you go into the papyrus presentation, so you talk about papyrus, how they were formed, what they do, some of the stats, like 200 school-age children take their lives every year. That's nearly 4 a week, and it makes people sit up and then, what support they offer, the training, They offer a course called Assist, which is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. I'm a big believer that every organisation should have at least 2 in each organisation, and every army unit should have 2 in each unit. When I spoke to the Army Welfare guys, there was like 100 odd people there, all the charities. They stopped what they were doing. They all came and listened. There was a couple of people got tearful in the audience, which I apologised for. Loads of people come up and shook my hand, and it was nice that a lot of people come up and signed up for the Assist course.
Is there something in the fact that you come across as and present yourself as, and I hope I'm not talking you down here, as just a normal bloke? Like, you're obviously you've been in the armed forces, so it could, there comes with it, that brings it almost a bit of credibility about it in terms of like, well, he must be brave and he must be a strong bloke, and physically he must absolutely have it, but then he's got this emotional side to him as well. But you talk, in a regional accent there, and I wonder whether or not actually that's a big part of it, that maybe you walk into a room and people maybe aren't quite sure what it is you're going to say or how you're going to deliver it, and just by simply being a normal guy, you can bring people on board and inspire people to sign up to courses by showing that you're normal, they're normal, we're all on the same level here, and we can actually work together.
It is, when you go, even though we're in the army, we do what we do. We just normal blokes. And, I've left the army, and even though I was discharged for medical reasons, I'm still a normal bloke. And, unfortunately, we do meet a lot of like-minded people who have lost children to suicide. So we always say we're part of that club that no one wants to be part of. But to achieve what we achieve, and, you look at some of the key charities and like Three Dads Walking, when a parent or a family member loses somebody, the way you do it, it's a normal thing to go on a crusade and try and make a difference, because it needs to be done. And I've always said to everybody I talk to is, if your why is big enough, you will achieve it. And, my why is big enough, it's got to be, somebody's got to try and push for it, it's massive. For Three Dads Walking and trying to get it something within the school curriculum. So, the younger children, it's not about really hitting home about the suicide. It's just giving them the confidence to talk. That's the most important thing, is if somebody sees you talking about it, then when they get to a point, it says, well, if he can talk about it, I can talk to somebody about it. It's giving them that confidence, to just reach out for me, and it's given them the chance of what Chloe didn't have, that confidence to reach out. And it's as simple as that, It's just, spreading the awareness. I try to talk about my whole feelings in front of people, and then hopefully someone in the audience is like, right, I'm going to talk. It's the Invictus was 10 years old this year. Chloe died 10 years ago. And Lou, the team manager, called me to tell me I was selected on Chloe's 30th birthday. So that was like mega. So and I haven't really mentioned the Royal British Legion much, but when Chloe died, they paid for her funeral. I'll always have them in a massive part of my heart. They sent me and my family on poppy breaks. When the military welfare weren't there, the Legion stepped in, and just to be selected for the games and the support they give you is unreal. It's been hard to be sometimes, because sometimes you think, well, I'm fit, I can run and things like that. And there's guys in the team with spinal injuries and amputees and stuff like that. But we're all part of a team, and we bond straight away. I laugh, a joke, you get on, share rhythms, and it is special. It's just about, for me, I'm huge about mental health now. I'm so passionate. I do have a little bit of therapy still as well. The MDR, there's therapist. I had 12 sessions. That was really good. It helped park the grief and the trauma, and it helped park the anger to the military. And now I'm having sessions to try and get me to slow down. I said to the therapist, when Chloe was around, I wasn't there for her, and when she died, I wasn't there for her. So now my brain tells me I've got to be there for everybody else. So and that's how it worked.
You're a very, very busy man, Trevor, and I hope that that's something which is sustainable for you in terms of the work that you're doing as well. I was just going to say, in terms of the Invictus stuff, how important is it that you maintain a little element of that? You've spoken about, maybe the way things ended with the army, but there's obviously a sense of, and people often speak about the camaraderie, the teamwork, the sort of being, surrounded by people. How much of that is almost slightly addictive, that the sense that there's an opportunity there to get a little piece of that back, and maybe Invictus throws that opportunity up there?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, we think about the connection we have in the military and bond with in the military. Everybody got on. I could go on a course and go and share a room with 12 guys that never knew. Sometimes I'd wake up with a chair on my bed because I snort. But yeah, you do. It is that chance to get back to where you potentially were. The togetherness, the supporting each other when you have rough moments. People who were going through difficult times and injuries, and we have low moments, but we've got a competitors WhatsApp group, and everybody's on there, and people reach out. We have chats, call each other when you have down moments, sort of thing. The support from the staff is great. The Legion do facilitate the whole Team UK going to Canada and Vancouver next year, and the cost is not going to be cheap, but for them to do that for us, it gives us that opportunity to potentially be back where we were in a specific way. We've had team building weekends, we've had family weekends where you finally go and do events. The games is in a 54,000 All-Seer stadium. It's a chance in a lifetime, and I think everybody's really thankful of the journey. I think and the chance, that second chance that we've been given. Just typical me, though. I'm in that whole team and that whole group, and I like to look at myself as a bit of a welfare support for everybody. When somebody's feeling a little bit low, I'll try and step in and help them and things like that. So, yeah, I'm quite protective as a which officer.
It's good, and I'm sure, Trevor, that they will turn to you, because they only need to listen to this to hear about how much work you've done and how much training you've got in this space to know that you're probably the right man. Let me ask you though, Trevor, whether you're speaking to a group of people or someone comes to you looking for support, or you're traveling out to Canada, to represent GB in the Invictus Games, and represent yourself within that as well. Is Chloe ever far from your mind?
Never. I've just done the Great North Run, and I carry a lock of her hair in my pocket. And when it gets tough, you just give it a little bit of a squeeze. And I did it. I've done every marathon I've done, and most of every physical stuff I've done is when you get to that point where you think you can't give any more. You can. It's if I'm honest, I didn't do any training for the Great North Run. I wanted to think, can I do it here if my body wants to give up? And I did. I got to the end. I did it when I son Bodie. First time we've done it together. He didn't wait for me. Yeah, she's always there. Always there. Every charity event, I have the T-shirt on with a face on, and I've got my Twitter name's Father of an Angel and things like that now. But I try not to label myself too much. I did it first when I was first going through it. It was everything. I lived my life for the whole thing. But I've changed now. Things are easier. I manage things a lot better. My thought process is great. I love giving the presentations. I love giving the crews, clients, and talking about it. The more the big thing is the more you talk about it, the more people will want to talk about it and reach out.
Have you totted up or tried to work out how many times you've told your story, or how many people that you've spoken to and shared your story with? How many people know Chloe's story as a result of the work you've been doing since you did?
I mean, it's 10 years now, and every time I've done a marathon and stuff like that, I've had articles in the newspaper, interviews on the BBC TV, and the most important thing I encourage people that the person that you've lost, don't be afraid to say the name, talk about them, and we do, because it helps raise that awareness. I'm in the HMRC now, and I'm now a mental health advocate for HMRC National, so I give the mental health presentation in work. You talk about your story a little bit at the beginning, because it's the best thing of connected people. We look at research and we look at education. Lived experience is the best education you'll ever get to share with people. I just talk about it all the time. I talk about what we do, because fingers crossed it saves a young life.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, certainly, Trevor, within the work you've done in those, last 10 years, that along the way, lives will have changed, and it may have been further upstream. So you may never have, get a sense of the number of people that you've supported. But I'm certain, Trevor, because of your commitment to the work that you've done, the lives will have been saved and will continue to be saved. And goodness knows, if that's not the case, with all the work you've got booked in the next 3 weeks, I am certain that further lives will be continued to be changed as well. But it's so great that you're so open with your story. And as you say, I completely agree with what you say about, the lived experience. It's not a bit of experience, a bit of knowledge. It's, I've lived this. This has been my life. This has been my story. And I think that's such a strong message to be able to send.
Yeah. Yes, it is. We've got to keep talking about it. Sometimes people think, it's keeping their memory alive because we talk about them all the time, but it's about education. It's getting into schools and talking about it. Colleges, universities. I've done talks to colleges and stuff like that, and events at universities. Just keep talking. It's a lifesaver. Having a safety plan. I was great to teach how to do a safety plan. They've got the hotline 24/7 now. It's amazing what is out there to save people's lives, and the more we talk about it, advertising, make people aware that it will work.
Thank you so much for your time, Trevor. I know LinkedIn is a good place to keep up with what you're up to as well. You mentioned that the Twitter account as well, so we'll get the links to that up on the podcast notes, so people can continue to support your work as well. It sounds like you're going to be a busy guy, so plenty of updates in the next few weeks as well. Thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing Chloe's story as well. Really appreciate you joining us on this week's edition of Mental Health Monday.
You're welcome.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999. Thanks for downloading the podcast this week. We'll be back next week with more Mental Health Monday.